Way before it was a trendy spiritual movement for celebrities, Kabbalah was a mysterious form of Jewish mysticism reserved for only the most devout Jews. I've always been spiritual and I love the idea of exploring the mysteries of the universe, but Kabbalah itself is a bit of a mystery.
It's a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma!
There are legends and superstitions that make Kabbalah sound more like Jewish magic. Things like fortune telling and amulets and reanimating the dead, which seem like they belong in Hogwarts, not Hebrew school. It all raises a ton of questions, so I want to demystify Jewish mysticism and really understand what is Kabbalah. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. 1 second there was nothing, then poof, something. But before there was something, when there was just nothing, where did God hang out? And what was he doing? My brain hurts just thinking about it, but these are the kinds of questions that Kabbalah tries to answer. So I reached out to my local Orthodox rabbi who helped me understand what is Kabbalah.
Kabbalah is the Jewish mystical tradition. It's a received tradition through prophets from God. And it's giving us insight into the nature of this world in a way that we can't perceive with our senses.
So Kabbalah is a whole bunch of wisdom that's been passed down for thousands of years, all about the hidden secrets of the universe. And according to Rabbi Jacobs, there are 3 main types of Kabbalah.
The first type, which is the safest type, is called theoretical Kabbalah. Everyone can learn about theoretical Kabbalah.
Theoretical Kabbalah is basically thought experiments and analogies that help us make sense of the idea of God and the nature of existence. Or as Rabbi Jacobs put it,
this system of interactions between God's infinite unknowable oneness and how that has manifested into something which is finite and knowable.
Wow. Okay, we'll unpack that more in a minute. But first, what are the other 2 types of Kabbalah?
Then there's what's called meditative Kabbalah. So meditative Kabbalah involves different types of meditations, many of which are using names of God. When you meditate on names of God, you're bringing powers into your body.
Hold on, so there really is Jewish magic? Now I can't stop thinking about Hebrew Hogwarts and Jewish Jedis, but not so fast. Let's back up and unpack each of the 3 types of Kabbalah, one at a time. First up, theoretical Kabbalah. Theoretical Kabbalah tries to answer the impossible, mind-bending questions of the universe. Like, if God is infinite, then how is there room for anything else?
The question is very, very deep, because by definition, once you have something that is infinite, nothing else can exist. This is called the first paradox of existence.
In other words, if God was infinite 1 second before creation, then how can anything else actually fit in the universe? Imagine a mug that's filled to the very top with coffee. The mug is the universe, and God is the coffee, filling every possible space with his infiniteness. You can't add anything else to the coffee, not even the tiniest splash of cream, without the mug overflowing. So how was an infinite God able to add the heavens and the earth, and the Garden of Eden, and the entire universe?
So what God had to do is he had to diminish his own essence to create a shield, and that is the physical world. The physical world, so to speak, blocks out God, allows some of it to enter, and some of it is blocked out to diminish it so that something other than God can exist.
If you didn't like my coffee analogy, don't worry. Rabbi Jacobs has a better one.
If you were a drop of water in the ocean, what would you look like? You'd be amorphous. You'd have no identity. So that's us before we were put into this body, into this physical existence. What happens if God takes you out and creates a drop of water that's being suspended above the ocean? That's right, it's a unique shape. So now it has a tremendous amount of individual identity. There's only one problem: it's not connected to its source. And if you're back with the source, you cease to exist. So what do? So what God did was he created the physical world. So imagine now taking that drop of water that's suspended in the air and encasing it in clear plastic, and then dropping it back into the ocean. To experience both simultaneously in individuality and the everythingness of the infinite is the gift that God is giving us.
Trying to understand God's infinite oneness and the creation of the world is a major focus of theoretical Kabbalah. And here's something that really blew my mind. Check out this description of the creation of the universe from back in the Middle Ages.
The Ramban went so far as to explain that in the void, in the nothingness, basically a tiny, infinitesimal point of energy appeared. He says there was ein mamashot, which means there was no substance to it. So he's describing pure energy. He described it as the size of a mustard seed. And he said from that contained all of the energy of the creation. And then as it expanded out, it solidified into matter. And that everything in this world, everything, was in that original dot and just needed to be unfolded.
That sure sounds a lot like the Big Bang Theory. I spoke to Rav Daniel Katz, who's been studying Kabbalah for the last 25 years. He sees a deep connection between Kabbalah and science.
Kabbalah is ancient technology. It's spiritual physics that maps out the patterns and the models and the energies that all reality runs on. The Kabbalists were always saying that behind every mass, every point of matter, every body, there's a field of energy that is generating that into being. That's considered science today. If you want to call it science, if you want to call it religion, if you want to call it to Kabbalah, a better word, it's reality.
According to Rav Daniel Katz, the ability to tap into those fields of energy is the basis of the second type of Kabbalah, meditative Kabbalah.
It means that a person can close down their conscious mind and attune to higher frequencies and awareness. When you learn to master the mind according to the Kabbalistic techniques, you open up channels of insight, of inner guidance, of intuitive ability.
Through meditation, we can achieve a higher spiritual awareness. We can elevate our consciousness and even receive knowledge. It's like there's a giant invisible library all around us, and meditative Kabbalah is the library card. But where does all this knowledge actually come from? Kabbalists believe that we can receive insight directly from God, the highest source. And below that, we can also receive guidance from angels. But what are angels?
And angels, not fat, naked babies with wings on, but they're forces of consciousness that are not embodied, that are part of the infrastructure of the running of reality, the interface between pure light and the divine and the physical world.
It might be easier to think of God as some bearded guy in the sky and angels as fat, naked babies. But that's just our attempt to comprehend the incomprehensible. It's how we humanize the forces of energy that are beyond our senses. Instead, we can think of angels as forces of consciousness, manifestations of God's will, acting as intermediaries between the physical world and the spiritual world. And guess what? Angels don't just come from the spiritual world. We create angels all the time without even realizing it.
When we do actions with wholly positive intention, we create positive angels, and they can influence our life. So too, when people act in fear, in the most ugly parts of human nature, with ego, then we create negative energies that also are around us and influence us.
Through meditation, we can tap into guidance from God and from angels, and we can avoid the bad influences and embrace the good. And then there's another source of guidance that I guess you can call ghosts. Yeah, you heard me right.
We believe, as do most wisdom traditions in the world, that when a person dies, there is a soul, there is a frequency, there is a field of energy that is eternal and that is outside space and time. It transcends space and time. And therefore, we consider it true as a part of reality that a person can attune to the frequency of an ascended soul.
Some Kabbalists claimed to have received wisdom from Jewish scholars who died centuries ago, like Elijah the prophet.
From the Kabbalistic perspective, absolutely there were teachers through their inner mastery that it could attune to subtle frequencies and fields, and were able to interact with and receive wisdom and guidance from great souls in history.
Were they literally getting tutored by ghosts? Or is that just a cool way to describe the kind of intuitive insight you can gain from deep reflection? I don't know. But hold on. If Kabbalists can download information from forces of consciousness that are not bound by space or time, does that mean they can learn about the future?
Let's talk about divination and fortune telling. There are very strict rules and guidelines of how to use Kabbalistic powers and Kabbalistic wisdom. And one of those is don't try and predict the future. And even any negative prediction does not have to come true, because the future is determined by the choices that we make.
Okay, time for a quick check-in. I know we're talking about angels and ghosts and it's a lot to take in, But so far it feels like everything is just a way of describing this concept, that there are forces of energy powering the universe that are beyond our comprehension. Is any of this really harder to believe than a textbook on quantum physics? But hold on, because we still haven't gotten to the third type of Kabbalah. So grab your wand and strap into your broomstick, and let's talk about magical Kabbalah.
We have stories in our Talmud of people that have resurrected the dead.
One of the stories he's talking about is when the prophet Elisha revives a young boy who died. Elisha prays fervently to God, then stretches himself over the boy's body. As the story goes, the boy's body begins to warm, then he sneezes 7 times, opens his eyes, and he's brought back to life. There's another story in the Talmud about 2 sages who used their mystical knowledge to create a calf that they could eat for their Shabbat meal. According to the Talmud, they used an ancient text called Sefer Yetzirah.
Sefer Yetzirah literally means the book of creation, which means how to use primary energies through meditative states to generate beings or entities into reality. And it's one of the oldest texts that we have from authentic Kabbalistic tradition.
Some say it dates all the way back to Abraham, and it describes how the universe was formed. Kabbalists believed it was possible to tap into the building blocks of creation through the power of divine names and mystical techniques. But another way to look at it is that magical Kabbalah really ties back to the power of consciousness and intention.
So the Kabbalists believe, as axiomatic, that reality fundamentally operated and was influenced by human consciousness. They believe that there were primary energies that exist in reality as building blocks before mass and matter, and they believed and taught ways that a person could clear their mind and fully align themselves and put their intention upon those energies, and through that combine energies and bring that through into reality.
This power of intention is the force behind amulets. Yup, they're Jewish amulets.
An amulet which has been used for thousands of years, and there are masters and Kabbalists that use them today, is a way of prayer, of intention, of understanding the power of letters, of divine names of God, of the Kabbalistic names of angels, and understanding the recipe and the formula for embodying them, expressing them into some form of writing, some form of engravement in order to effect a healing, a transformation.
The power of intention is also behind the idea of holy water. Yeah, I know. Jewish holy water is a thing.
There's an absolute axiom that water and certain liquids are excellent conductors of consciousness and energy. And by holding it and saying a prayer over it and fixing an intention, that you can activate that energy and share that with other people. And then when a person drinks that, they can take that prayer, that consciousness, and it can be healing and a blessing and protective.
In some ways, it's pretty mainstream to acknowledge the power of consciousness and intention. The idea of mind over matter. Think and grow rich. Manifest your destiny. Is the whole premise behind the hugely popular book, The Secret, that thoughts and intentions influence your reality.
Today, there's an idea called the law of attraction. The Kabbalists used to call that the koyach ha-moshech thousands of years ago. And they said when a person puts their attention on something deeply and they give specific instructions, that you can manifest, draw something towards you and bring that to you.
But come on, there's still a huge leap from the power of positive thinking to resurrecting the dead. If I study Kabbalah, can I really tap into magical forces of creation?
I can't tell you that. And certainly if any Kabbalists claim that they could, I don't think you should trust them, number one. Number two is there's absolutely Kabbalists and mystics alive today, which I'm blessed to know and have interacted with, who have profound states of consciousness that they live in consistently. When you step into the room with them, you can feel that in a tangible, real way. When you ask them for a blessing, when a sick person comes in, I can tell you many stories. They have the ability with their consciousness alone to heal, to receive intuitive answers which are profoundly, unusually, uncannily insightful. It's something that individuals can begin to learn and master slowly over time. But there are both souls that are born like that, and also individuals through tremendous hard work over years attain a degree of mastery where they're able to do uncanny things and live on an uncanny level.
I'm not really sure what to make of all this. It's a lot to take in. But here's something I find really interesting. The mainstream view of magic usually links it to bad, dark forces, witches and black magic and devil worship. But with Judaism, it's the opposite. Kabbalah is seen as the deepest part of the Torah. It was practiced by some of our most revered sages. It goes hand in hand with Jewish observance. you can't have Kabbalah without Torah. And that means the powerful forces studied by Kabbalists are also accessible to everyday Jews in everyday life. Sure, Kabbalists have methods that are specially designed to optimize the way they interact with spiritual forces. But the truth is, all of Judaism is filled with practices designed to elevate life closer to the spiritual world. That's like the whole point. Learning about Kabbalah really changed the way I see the world, and it makes me even more passionate about living my everyday Jewish life with positive intention.